Did you know that on November 7th of this year, the people of Kentucky will have the opportunity to choose a governor that aligns with foundational principles and that will stand up against the woke ideology that is being forcefully distributed in our culture and to our children? This year's election is a choice between Daniel Cameron, who will fight for Kentucky's values wherever and whenever he can, and Radical Andy, who will destroy Kentucky's values however he can. Guess who I'm voting for?
Welcome to the Josh Calloway Podcast.
Welcome to the Josh Calloway Podcast. This is Josh Calloway, State Representative in the 10th District of Kentucky. And other than that, he's actually a pretty good guy from what I'm told. That's what his wife said anyway. But
Andy?
Josh.
Josh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Got my good friend Aaron here with me tonight. How you doing, Aaron?
I'm doing great. I'm reading all these hilarious headlines.
Here we are in the middle of the night recording again. I got a text today from somebody who said, do you realize it's been since July the 3rd since y'all put a video out and done anything in regard to political discussions that we normally do? And I knew it had been that long. There's been a lot going on, a lot of things that have been taking place. And here we are tonight. Got a lot of things that I really want to discuss, but I think this is important to understand, remind people that November the 7th will be the governor's race.
Right.
And I want to make sure that people are informed, that they're prepared, and most importantly, that they go vote. And so I think that is something that we can't talk too much about, to remind people, encourage people. There's been a lot that has happened in the last several years, especially since 2020. And one of my biggest fears has been that people, because of some of the nefarious things that have happened in elections since that time, not just at 2020, but since then, that people will lose faith in the system. Right. And they'll quit participating in it. And I know that we have to continue to make it better. We have to change things. We know there's crazy things going on in blue states that I can't control.
Right.
But what I can do is fight for good policy in the state of Kentucky and make sure that I participate and that I encourage people to continue to participate in this election. There is a lot at stake with this election. A whole lot at stake. And over the last couple months, especially in the last month, Mr. Andy has been traveling around the state and talking about all the wonderful policy that he has bartered and implemented. And what he doesn't say to the people when he's speaking about it, that he actually vetoed the policy that made those things happen. Right. And so he really never seems to get around to those things.
Well, and we don't have any type of media that at his events will say, hey, didn't you veto that? Hey, can I ask a question? Didn't you veto that thing that you're championing right now?
Exactly. So we see the media has been complicit in many of the lies that have been propagated.
Whenever he goes around in Kentucky, then he acts like he's this moderate. But whenever he's in Frankfort, he's a radical. So, he can say whatever he wants to whenever he's out on his circuit and trying to lie to people. But whenever he gets up to Frankfort and he's got his pen out, vetoing or signing or doing whatever, he's a radical.
Right.
But there's not really that many people to hold him accountable, that have the guts to do that.
No, he put a statement out actually a day or so ago. He put this statement out, and this is what he said. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Kentucky's workers are the best in the world. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I think we need to increase our workforce. That's a fact. Mm-hmm. But we do have great workers in the state of Kentucky. And then he goes on to say, and I've always got their back. So I guess that is past, present, and future is what he means by that word always. And I put a statement out and said, I know people, and because I do, who literally lost their business because he shut their business down. Yeah. And so if that is the way that he's got Kentucky's workers back, I'll take a hard pass. Yeah. Because that's not what I'm interested in. And so we have things from as far as economic policy, we have the social policy, we have freedom policies, we have faith policies, all of those things. This guy, as you just said, has been a radical and tried and would be a dictator pretty much if the General Assembly had not reined him in and said, no, you don't get to be king in Kentucky. The people rule the state, and they rule through their legislators. We make the law, not you. We decide how the money is spent because we handle the budget and all of those things. And it's a shame that we have to go in and change laws to keep somebody from actually just taking over the state.
Right. Well, and the response a lot of times is, well, whenever the flooding happened in eastern Kentucky, then he showed up there, which is true. I mean, he showed up and he was on video and, you know, got a few photo ops and different things like that. But what about, I mean, the flooding was terrible, but he's not there anymore. It's not like he lives there, you know, and then that entire portion of eastern Kentucky has just been completely devastated by the absence of coal work, by the absence of any kind of jobs, and he's not solved that. He's not even tried to solve that. He's not even attempted in any way to, introduce education that would help them qualify for jobs, you know, the 2-year programs for, trades and things like that they do in the technical schools and all that. He hasn't done that. They have successfully put, you know, as many LGBTQ plus teachers in eastern Kentucky as they want to.
Correct.
But can't quite get it figured out how to provide jobs for eastern Kentucky. So I'm not, downplaying the fact that he showed up whenever the floods came. I think any governor should do that. But that doesn't make him, a job creator because he showed up for a photo op and a video.
Right.
You know, I don't
It's
understand
policy.
how that's a response. How people, that's a response to people who are, disagreeing with you about his economic policy. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, this is what we have going on. It's coming into 2024. It's going to be a budget year, and we've already started working on the budget. I've been doing that through my elections committee, and there's also economic development things that are taking place. Right. I've got a couple committees that I'm not serving on right now, and so I haven't been able to be absolutely engaged like I would like to in those. Those things, some of that will change, and it'll be behind us at some point. But we're going into a budget year, and it would be unbelievable for this state to walk into 2024 into a budget year, facing the social and economic adversity that we're facing as a state and as a country,
right, with
somebody the opposite of him in the executive branch.
Yes.
And so, I think it's important to expose some of these things. I want people to understand, because there's been a lot of money that's flowed through this state as a result of the flooding that you brought up, as a result of the tornadoes that came. Yep. There was a lot of federal money that came. There was state money that was allocated that, oh, by the way, the General Assembly actually had a budget reserve trust fund set aside that enabled us to be able to respond to that with state money instead of federal money to some degree, so that we're not as beholden to the federal government, which we have to get away from. So walking into that, I think it's important for people to understand that we made the policy. He didn't make the policy. We allocated the money. He didn't allocate the money. And when it comes to day-to-day affairs, I don't know that people understand, and the people of my district, I want them to understand. If we have a road problem that needs to be corrected, that can't be handled at the local level, that has to go beyond that, they absolutely, people in his department will not respond.
Right.
They will not pick up the phone and call me back. They will not send a text back. They don't return on emails. Time and time again, I've documented it because I want to make sure that it's clear and that people understand this is what we are dealing with. So you're right. He doesn't just go around the state and act like a moderate. He also acts like a nice person.
Right.
A nice guy.
Totally different.
But look at all the lawsuits that he has filed against the legislature when he was Attorney General. And then look at the type of policy that he filed lawsuits against. Look at the policy he has vetoed. And then look at the individuals that he has actually went after from a lawsuit standpoint. Right. So everything that he portrays is not the way that it is. Right. And people don't interact with them. They're not there in Frankfurt. They may not see that. They see all of the press conferences that he did during COVID and tried to come across as this caring, concerned guy, and that's why I'm forcing you to stay home. That's why I'm saying you can't go to church. That's why I'm going to send the state police to your church on Easter Sunday to take your license plate number so we can cite you for going to church. Right. That is what we're dealing with.
Well, and it's all about the mindset, right? So we could tie this into a ton of things. But the same thing just came out about Joe Biden this week. You know, they try to present him as this, like, ice cream eating, sunglasses wearing, dolt in public. And I mean, obviously you can listen to him and tell he's not there. But behind the scenes, then he's obviously taken all of his anger from his rapid onset dementia out on all of his aides and stuff, and cussing them out and doing all this stuff. That's the Democrats for years. I mean, look at, there was another one that came out. It wasn't Amy Klobuchar. Who was it? A couple of months ago. Anyway, their aides came out and said, behind closed doors, you can't even work with them because they're so terrible. They become like this little tyrant. You do what I say, you do all this. That's exactly how Andy Bashir is. That's how Joe Biden is.
Can I jump in here for just a minute? You brought up something that I think I would like to talk about for just a minute.
Yeah, for sure.
And we see this on both sides, not just on the Democrat side when it comes to some of the language that is used that is absolutely unprofessional and disrespectful. Right. You might think that's kind of funny, but just a funny story. When Trump first started running for president, he had just announced his campaign. He had made some speeches and done some interviews, and there was some just unprofessional language that was used. That's right. Trump, And I actually emailed his campaign, and I said, you know what? You'll lose no votes and you'll lose no respect from anybody refraining from just being unprofessional. Yeah. And we have lost so much of that just being professional in our dress and language in our society, and it trickles down to our young people, and people end up having no respect for the office because the person is not respectful.
Well, I mean, John Fetterman with his hoodie and shorts.
Exactly. And I know that some people accept things. I think it's wrong. Two, I wasn't raised that way, and I'm thankful that I wasn't to use that kind of language. When people have come after me, have attacked me verbally, I've never responded with that kind of language. Never done that. I think it's extremely unprofessional. And to hear that behind the scenes, the President of the United States of America is using those types of filthy words with sexual connotation toward aides that are there trying to help and support him. And it may be driven out of, he may not even know he's doing it, but it comes out of habit because of the way that he has lived his life and the way that he has responded. And I just think, I just wish that we could go back to where we had that respect for the office. We had that respect in public to where you never heard those kinds of words come out of politicians' mouth when they were speaking in public. And I know some people think it's cool. They think it's emphatic. But you can make the point without doing that. That's Joshology. Just thought I'd throw it out there while you brought it up. But I think it's important. We have seen the deterioration that has happened among our kids, our young people, and you hear kids say things to their parents and use language that is offensive,
Right.
but it's totally disrespectful.
Yeah.
Used to, a man would never say certain things in front of a lady. You know, just those types of respect that we have lost, that character, the morality of those. And I try to instill it in my children. I say yes, sir, and no, sir, to my kids when they were babies. One is that I was trying to teach them to say it, but I was respectful to them, and sometimes I had to be stern, but I expected respect in return.
Yeah.
And to hear the president's doing that, and to see what we've seen of politicians, I just think it's wrong. I think it's bad. I think it's a poor image, and I think it tears down the respect that people should have for the office.
And it's, it's everywhere, though. The FCC, too, has relaxed its standards so much on the type of language that they allow, in certain, supposed to be PG rated things.
Right.
And part of that is that it's a mutually assisting thing. So if your president's up dropping, all kinds of foul language, then saying a little one here and there probably, doesn't mean as much to the parents. But it's on both sides, though. And the Republicans are like, well, it's free speech, it's this or that, whatever. My parents always taught me that is a stopgap for stupidity.
Yes.
And idiocy. So you don't know what to say, so you just say the same, curse words that everybody else says. Your brain isn't capable of formulating the sentences fast enough, and so you just use a stopgap to take out your anger on people. And I think that's, pretty well borne out in a lot of ways in our politics. We have a lot of idiots in Washington. So
Exactly right.
Yeah, they cuss, they party, and they pass terrible bills. That's kind of what they do.
I brought that up because we were talking about Andy Beshear as a whole. And I want people to understand that, and I'm sure it's clear, people know who I am, that do know who I am, know that I'm not supporting his candidacy, so that I'm not. But it's not just because he's a Democrat.
Right.
It's also because of the fact of the policies and the person that he is. When you look at the policy that he has vetoed, he could be the governor of California.
Right. Yeah.
Him and Gavin Newsom could be good friends, and the same type of policies that Gavin Newsom has been able to pass, the opposite we have passed in Kentucky, and Andy Beshear has vetoed those policies.
Yeah.
And at least when it comes to our kids, you would think that he would take a stand. He didn't veto the Second Amendment bill that we passed this session. He didn't sign it. He just let it go into law. I think he did that for political reasons.
Right.
But at least when it comes to our children, you think that he would have said, you know what, I'll leave that alone. Let's let SB 150 go into law, and I'll support that because it protects our kids. At least get them to 18. And you know where I'm at with when it gets 18, all of this mindset that we're dealing with, I believe is wrong.
Right. Yeah.
But he didn't even have enough decency to protect our kids, to make sure that they don't receive irreparable harm, that they're not doing damage to their body that they can't fix as a minor, and then advocates for the opposite of it to allow them to be able to do that. That's child abuse, and he advocates for it.
And he has weaponized the education department with Jason Glass, and even with his Lieutenant Governor Jackie Coleman, and the guidance that they craft in the committees that she works with and that Jason Glass works with, to give guidance and to behind the scenes weaponize the education system against the normality of nature and who we are born as. They have waged an all-out war against the minds of our kids in reference to sexuality and gender identity and all this stuff. They've overloaded them with just an assault of information and images and pornographic images. They've all done that behind the scenes. So I really am not surprised that if he's the one that is helping to drive all of that corruption in our education system, that he didn't have the guts to, stand up against it whenever it comes down to actually them being physically altered. He's not going to stand up against that either.
And this is what we said. You talked about from the top down in policy with Jason Glass. Emails have been revealed that showing the role that JCPS teachers had in organizing the student protest against Senate Bill 150.
Student-led protest.
The student-led protest. And so on March 29th, hundreds of students came out. They were there protesting the governor's veto that we were going to override. They were protesting that. And in this that happened, come to find out, there were teachers inside of JCPS that were recruiting kids, getting kids to be engaged and to be involved in this and supporting it, trying to get them to engage in protest against policy that their legislature had passed. And these are people that are there to teach math, English, science, history.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what they're supposed to
That's what it's supposed to be teaching.
Right.
We've seen, and again, this is not every school. We have seen, though, the numbers have come out, and we are not, as a whole, doing a very good job at educating our kids.
Right.
We lost ground during COVID. We were already on a downward trend. And now here we are in the middle of a crisis when it comes to education.
Right.
And we have people from the top that is implementing policy and that is pushing agendas, that is recruiting kids to go and to protest bills that are trying to protect children.
Right. It's so similar to like the Hansel and Gretel story, where the witch like puts out all the candy and leads them to this house, that's made out of candy, and then she cages them up and fattens them up and then throws them in the fire. That's exactly how it seems with a lot of these doctors. There was a video that was going around virally, and a man, his wife took his 9-year-old and his 7-year-old into the doctor, and his 9-year-old sits down and the doctor asks him, how does he identify? Male, female, non-binary, gender fluid, whatever. They are introducing them already. And it's happening at not only at the psychiatric level, but also at the pediatrician level, which is absolutely ridiculous. Okay, pediatricians are not supposed to be exploring your child's sexual identification.
Yeah.
Their biological sex is what allows you to treat them. Do you understand? Does that make sense?
Right.
Their gender identity does not affect how their body reacts to the medication. It's their biological sex that determines that.
Yeah.
So pediatricians should not be introducing any of this or concerned about this at all. They are introducing it. And they're telling them, oh, there's this new world out there, this amazing world where you explore all of these things and you find out who you are. And in reality, what they do is they lead them along this little trail, and then they entrap them in their own body with surgeries that they can't reverse, gender and puberty blockers and hormone therapy that they can't reverse. And then whenever they can't do anything anymore, they're trapped in their body, they come to themselves, then they commit suicide or they, whatever happens.
Right.
Then they use their death for their own benefit.
Yeah.
So, that's not what our education system is supposed to be about. It's not supposed to be about introducing them to this fantasy world where they're going to be used for the rest of their life by the political left. It's supposed to be about them being able to learn things that are going to help them succeed in the future.
Right.
How are we ever going to get underprivileged and minority kids, ethnic minorities, and underprivileged economically kids? How are we ever going to get them to move up economically or move out of the place that they're in, the projects or the places in Eastern Kentucky with no jobs and all they have to do is deal drugs? That's the only job that they can find. how are we going to ever get them out of there if we can't even teach them to read and write at a level that allows them to have a normal job?
Right.
Something besides flipping burgers at McDonald's.
But we can push this ideology.
Yes. Yeah.
And spend money and effort and
what is that preparing them for?
And taxpayer dollars.
Explain to me how that ideology is getting
taxpayer
them out of the
dollars
issue
were
that they're in.
spent to make this happen. So I think most people know where we're at with this. We've belabored this point over and over and over, and I always say this. I'll keep saying that. I'm going to keep talking about protecting our kids. But we know that there was a judge that placed an injunction on the gender affirming care, puberty blockers, hormone therapy, those types of things. And we saw the same thing happen in Tennessee. And then the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, their attorney general had put a request for them to lift the injunction. And so this court system, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, accepted that request, and they lifted the injunction. And we believe that that's exactly what's going to happen here in the state of Kentucky. We believe that we're going to win.
Are we Sixth Circuit too?
I'm sorry?
Are we Sixth Circuit?
So, yes. And so Attorney General Cameron has already filed the appeal.
Good deal.
We think we're going to win. This is the point. The point is that the guy at the top, who is the CEO basically of Kentucky, he runs the executive branch. And I've heard people make this statement. Well, we have a super majority, so what does it matter? It matters a lot.
Yeah. Because
the person that is over the unemployment system that doesn't work,
right,
that people still can't get their money from,
right, yeah,
is placed by him. The guy that is over the education system is recommended by him.
Right.
The people that oversee these cabinet positions that are bringing all of this ideology in, whether it be transportation, you name it.
Right.
He has appointed the most leftist, woke people that could be appointed to some of these positions in the state of Kentucky.
Right. And
he's done it in the name of diversity and equity and inclusion.
Okay.
And all that is indoctrination when it goes in at the education level. And that is what we are dealing with. We have got to deal with the DEI in our school system. We have got to deal with it in our government system. What it does is it takes meritocracy and throws it to the wayside, and it takes their ideology and it drives it into the minds of kids. And they have to have our kids to make this work. The only way that they win is if they have the minds of our kids. They have to grow this mindset to a majority of people that keeps them empowered to make it keep working. That's why it's so important. That's why I'm going to be talking about consistently Daniel Cameron, do everything we can to see that he wins. Now, somebody put a statement out and said, oh, look, Josh is crying about being placed off his committees, and now he's trying to get in good with the executive branch and trying to get back in good graces so he can get his committee positions back. This has nothing to do with committee positions. This has all to do with the fact that I want to make sure that Andy Beshear is not the governor of Kentucky. His ideas, his ideology, who he is as a person is totally against the principles of the majority of the elected people across this state.
Right.
And so I think it's important that we expose it. I want people to understand this is why. This is why on this Friday, I don't know when this video come out, but this Friday today is the 12th of July. So this Friday we'll be hosting a meet and greet for Daniel Cameron in Hardinsburg, Kentucky. It will be at the fiscal court meeting building, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited to bring him, let people hear him, and to make sure that the people of this district see what kind of person he is, the contrast of what we're dealing with, and hopefully get great results come November.
Well, and let's think back, almost 4 years to Matt Bevin versus Andy Bashir. And Matt Bevin had an issue with the teachers, because he was in reality, he was trying to save their pension. And Matt Bevin wasn't like the most, he was a little prickly, a little bit like a porcupine, with people. So, I mean, he wasn't like a great salesman. We'll just put it that way. But based on the logistics of what he was putting forward, the details of what he was putting forward, then he was trying to save the teachers' pensions. Mm-hmm. And, of course, the Courier-Journal and everybody all, piled on him, oh, Matt Bevin hates teachers. Well, Andy Bashir comes in, and then he guts all of the pension programs, for new teachers and all this stuff, and made it basically so you better retire pretty quick or it's not going to benefit you anymore.
Yeah.
Is basically how he set up the pension thing, just like his dad had done, about 8 to 12 years before. So a lot of teachers retired. There was this like mass exodus of teachers in Kentucky. And, that was one thing that was mentioned in this past session. Who's going to solve the teacher shortage? How about the guy that caused the teacher shortage, right? And then, his education commissioner, the people that he, emphasized to be hired into those into that, whatever you would call that, deficit of teachers. Those people can't teach people how to read and write. Yeah. I'm not saying all the teachers. I'm saying the ones that the radicals that replace them. Mm-hmm. They can't teach them how to read and write. All they can teach them is how to protest or how to be a part of the LGBTQIA plus, hyphenated brackets community. That's all that they can do.
Yeah.
Elections have consequences. Bottom line. You might not have liked Matt Bevin, and he wasn't like the most likable person on the face of the planet. But if you had him as governor, most likely you wouldn't have all of the problems with the education system that you do today. I know Jason Glass wouldn't be
That's exactly right.
The commissioner of education or whatever he's called, commissioner of LGBTQ in Kentucky schools. Exactly. I know that he wouldn't be there. And so elections have consequences. You can believe what you want to about elections and their security or whatever. I don't, I'm not getting into any of that. If you don't get out and vote, though, you don't stand a chance.
That's right.
If you don't let's say, for instance, let's just hypothetically say that possibly someone is rigging elections somewhere. If you don't get out and vote, you can't even prove it. Right? Because they're going to get out and vote, So you have to get out and vote for Daniel Cameron.
Yes.
And let's, stop this nosediving airplane that is the future of our state because of how our children are being treated. Let's stop that from happening, you know, and correct course, while we have a chance
while
to do
we
that.
have a chance to do it. That's the key.
We already have probably at least 2 years, if not 3 years, of students that are going to be so far behind where they're supposed to be once they graduate that they're going to have to make up all of that education that they lost in the school system. They're going to have to make it up in the workforce or at college. So, for instance, if somebody, and I know this is, getting into the weeds a little bit with education, but if somebody let's say they graduate from high school and they're not where they should be on let's just take reading and math. They're not where they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And then they decide to go to a community college because they don't want to do a manual labor job or something like that. They decide to go to a community college. Nearly every degree that you get involved in, whether it's a 2-year degree, whether it's a 1-year program, whether it's a 4-year degree, is going to require you to be proficient in reading and in math.
Right.
So as soon as you get to that community college, they immediately are behind. That adds at least an extra semester, if not an extra 2 semesters, to their college bill that they have to pay for. Also, to when they can graduate, it pushes them out a year from being able to be into the workforce as a competent individual.
Yeah.
And it pushes them out as well as how much money they owe. They lose a year of wage earning. They lose a year of being able to pay taxes and do all of these things. It has a snowball effect all throughout the state and all throughout the economy.
Right.
So while they have wasted their time on their online classes pushing transgender ideology and LGBTQ plus support and gender affirming all of this stuff, then they just allowing that to happen for these 4 years with Andy Bashir has set our economy, set our children, set our future back by who knows how long.
Right. And this is where it heads, right? So, no, this is where it heads. It's an ideology that is growing, right? So, we keep electing people like that. We keep pushing policy. Now, look, the CDC, which is, they're extremely trustworthy for sure. I mean, they've nailed it in the last 4 or 5 years. I can't think of anything really that they've been wrong on. Can you?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm just trying to think, is there any policy in the last maybe 4 years that they pushed or guidance that they gave that they were wrong in? Because they're usually, I think, pretty right.
My favorite was the vaccinated people cannot contract or spread the virus. That was my favorite.
Maybe
And
that was maybe the one thing they were wrong on.
You will not, Dr. Fauci, you will not spread the virus. Whatever. I can't do a Fauci voice, but,
So now the CDC is give guidance for trans people chest feeding their kids, accused, and they've been accused of failing to consider possible health risks. So basically what has happened, the CDC has published advice for trans and non-binary individuals on seeking guidance on how to chest feed their infants. Okay, let me just make this real clear first off. Only a woman can breastfeed a child in the sense of actually feeding the child. Okay? Only women can do that.
How stupid have we become that you have
So
to say that?
basically, this is what it says, is that they're trying to give men guidance that biological men that have taken hormones to grow a chest and how to feed their newborn children. And there was a picture that came out of this guy here the other day that evidently was going to take some type of radiation or chemo or cancer treatment, and he had his baby latched onto his chest, which is absolutely sickening. It's perverted. And he was talking about that he was going to do that. And then right after that happens, we see the CDC comes out with this guidance that is affirming that. Now, a couple things to think about. One is that formula, for instance, that babies are fed with. We've had a shortage of formula that we've dealt with supposedly in the last several years, last few years. But there is so many regulations on those companies as to, and the work that is went in scientifically to try to formulate something that would be equivalent to the nourishment that a child would receive from their mother.
And the U.S. has stricter standards than almost anywhere else.
Exactly. Unless you claim to be a woman and you're a guy.
Right.
Then all those hormones and things that they're pumping in you and whatever kind of sick, whatever it is that the baby would draw from the man. I mean, where are we at and what are we doing? And then somebody, I hate to even bring it up because I don't want them to think that I would give them any credence because they used to be an educator here in the state of Kentucky.
Used to get paid in the state of Kentucky.
Yeah, put it that. Well, he was definitely educating.
Yeah, I don't know if that's education.
Not on anything that probably we would want our kids to learn, but basically, and he puts a statement out. He said, Josh doesn't care that none of the science or data bears this out. All he cares about is whatever fantasies he can invent that support his hatred. This is what I want to say about that. He is partly right. He is partly right. I'm not going to say that I don't care about the science or the data, but I'm going to say that's secondary to the fact that they need to get these kids off the chest of these men that are doing perverted, wicked, ungodly things with these little kids in the name of supposedly feeding them. And the one individual that became national whenever he put the picture out had other pictures of fetishes and things that he was doing before he was letting this baby latch on.
Right.
It's unthinkable that we have got here, who would have ever thought? Can you imagine being a child and growing up and finding out that your dad did this to you?
Oh my goodness.
I mean,
are we sure this isn't a way just to provide jobs for therapists?
If it wasn't so sickening, it would be laughable.
Yeah.
But these type of people support this. And I've had people, when I put a statement out about this, and basically all that I said in regard to it was, I'll find it so I quote it exactly. I've said, you've heard of the blind leading the blind. This is in regard to the CDC. Said, you've heard of the blind leading the blind. This is the sick leading the sick. Stop abusing these innocent babies because it's abuse.
What does the Center for Disease Control have to do with this? You would think that that's what the CDC stands for. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, whatever.
They have to give credence to this.
You would think that they would really be focused on the gender dysphoria part that is a mental illness, that they might actually want to solve that and not, make problems worse. I don't understand. It's like there is no part of the national or the state level bureaucracy, if it is under the control of Democrats, there's no part of it that follows their rules or stays in their lane or does what they're supposed to do. The only thing that they are focused on is this radical ideology. That's the only thing they're focused on. The military, did you see the numbers for how much the military spent on transgender surgeries and how it quadrupled from 2016, 2017 to 2018, 2019? Again, not turning this into an anti-Trump thing. But if you don't know that that's going on in the military, I understand they can hide it. I understand all of that stuff. But that's got to stop.
It's got to stop.
That's ridiculous.
It has to stop. And the thing about it is that the same people that said if you get the vaccine, you can't get COVID and you can't spread COVID are saying that it's okay for these kids to do this.
Trust the science. Trust the science.
It's okay. Number one, it's not okay because it's sick.
Right.
Number two, it's not okay because we don't know. I do know that there are tons of medications that if a woman is taken that she's not supposed to breastfeed her baby.
Right.
And these people are not women. They claim to be women. I don't even like using the transgender word because there's no such thing. You cannot change your gender. But they are doing this. And this is the kind of policy what I was saying a little bit ago is that when I put the statement out and all I said was leave the little innocent babies alone, have people come back and attack me as, well, you're not inclusive. You are homophobic. You are transphobic. You are all of these things. No, I am for kids. Stop abusing the kids. Right. And it's every day something else.
And
that we're having to discuss and talk about and fight against. But if we don't win these battles, we lose the war in this realm. I understand that we've already won. I get it. Jesus is going to come back. He's going to set all this straight. He's going to make everything right. I know that for a fact. But until then, we have a responsibility to the truth, to speak the truth, and to do everything we can to advance the truth.
Right. And, how much more evidence do you need right off the bat that dude, which is what he is, that dude is not going to ever do what is best for that child? Never.
Right.
Never going to do what's best for that child. Let's just say, for instance, that in 10 years they figure out some magical way that men would be able to have some kind of surgery to feed kids that way. It's still sick, and disgusting.
Oh, that's exactly right.
Let's just say magically that's what's happening. That's not where we're at right now. That kid's still got to have food. That kid still has to eat something else. This has nothing to do with the child. It is using that child for his benefit. Is using that child to satisfy fantasies that he has in his messed up world, in his messed up mind.
There you go.
The womanliest of women.
There you go. Here's me on the bus to hospital for first chemo round, feeding my child for the last time.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't want the poison of the chemo to poison his child.
I know, it's not funny.
And here he is.
Has no concern for what else he's putting in the kid's body. Yeah.
But we're supposed to just act like, oh, this is fine. We're okay. I'm okay with that. I accept that. I'm inclusive. That, I'm telling you, that we are headed to a point of no return if we do not take a stand on these issues.
I'm very inclusive. I am all for including all of these child abusers in the criminal profile and them being put in jail.
Yeah,
I'm fine with it. If you perform surgeries on children that are minors, indoctrinate them and convince them that these surgeries are good for them, I'm fine with including them in the criminal population. They can go live in that population and see how they fit in there.
Yeah.
I'm all for inclusivity. I say include, seclude, solitary confinement, whatever they need. I'm for it.
Right.
But there is nothing inclusive about a man using a child as a prop and that child being malnourished because he can't live in reality. Mm-hmm. There's nothing inclusive about me accepting that. That is just delusion, and that's it. Well, why am I supposed to pretend like I think that that's real?
Yeah.
Like I think that that's good. I'm never going to think that.
No.
And I'm not going to pretend.
I'm not going to pretend. I'm not going to play along.
There's nothing that they can do that will convince me that that's good for that child and that it's real.
Yeah.
There's no amount of studies. There's no amount of, because the child still has to eat. There's nothing they can do to convince me that that's real.
And the child is absolutely defenseless against this.
Yes.
Defenseless. Has no idea, has no way to protect itself.
Right.
And our society is trying to normalize it.
And they always will take things that are so stupid that nobody with half a brain would believe them.
Yeah.
So stupid and so revolting that nobody that was a human of any sort, normal, living in reality, would not see it and their stomach not turn. That's what they always choose to say. If you don't accept this, you're a bigot and you don't trust the science and all this stuff.
Right.
That's what they always choose. It's about control.
Exactly.
If they can't control us, or if they can't convince us, then they'll try to control us. Mm-hmm. And they're not convincing me. I don't care how much they do. I don't care how many drag queens dance down the main street of Louisville, Kentucky. Those are not women. I don't care what they say. You're never convincing me,
Well, on a good note,
Yep.
All right, this is not good in the sense of why that a baby might be in this position. Mm-hmm. We're talking about babies being abused. Hopkinsville has put in a baby box, which is going to be another way to serve someone if a woman has an unplanned or unwanted pregnancy, instead of aborting that child if she has that child and can't take care of it or for whatever reason. They have these baby boxes that have been put up, and I don't know if you've heard about these or seen them, but they're temperature controlled. They have alarms set on them, so it notifies somebody if the baby is put in there, and protects that little baby and gives it the opportunity to find a home and to be raised in a good environment. And so, as much as I hate the idea of thinking that somebody could just drop a baby off and walk away from it,
Right.
The fact that the baby gets to live and has an opportunity is pretty amazing that they have put these up. Representative Nancy Tate has been huge in trying to get these placed throughout the state of Kentucky. And with the overturning of Roe v. Wade and what is going on with abortion in the state of Kentucky, we're trying to save every baby that we can, every life that we can. And so we were talking about babies being abused. We're talking about one that maybe won't be abused here with the opportunity to be able to find a good home. So
say something, tie this into something that's going back negative, but ties into this a little bit. Something that, like, this has just personally ticked me off really bad.
I didn't know we were ever negative here.
Sorry. The Hunter Biden, best dad in the world.
Yeah.
He, his deal with the lady that he impregnated and then disowned the child. The child can't use the Biden name, which I think several conservative pundits have pointed out. That's the only reason that Hunter Biden gets all that he gets is because of the Biden name, which I don't understand because the Biden name has always been associated with plagiarism and, nepotism and stuff like that. But that makes sense.
Evidently, there's a lot of money there.
Yeah. China really loves the Biden name, I guess.
China and Ukraine.
But there were a bunch of people that were commenting, like, on The View and different places about that child and saying that the mother is using the child in order for publicity in order to play on the Biden name, right? And one of the ladies said something about, well, it's like her choice to have the child or whatever. And I'm gonna explain to you what they're saying behind closed doors, and they won't say out in public. What they're saying is she could have aborted that child, and this would have never been a problem for Hunter Biden.
Yeah,
that's the reason why the president is saying that they only have 6 grandchildren, because they wanted her to abort that child, and she didn't. Now they won't come out and say it because it would look even as bad as our society is and as twisted as it is. That would be so revolting to people that they would, it would be terrible for them politically.
Right.
But that's what they want. That is exactly why the Democrats want abortion.
Yeah.
That's why Obama said that he wanted to keep abortion around. If my child, he talks about his children, if one of their children were to make a mistake and become pregnant, he wouldn't want that baby to ruin the rest of their life.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he said about his daughter. Being 18 years old and having a baby. That's how the Democrats think about abortion. That's how they think about your children, too. If they can't use them for what they want, if they turn out to be conservative, if they turn out to, honor you as conservative parents, they can't use them for their purposes. They wish they were dead.
Yeah.
And that's bottom line.
Well, and this is the thing. They have to have our children in order to prolong their mindset.
Right.
Because if you think about that lifestyle, like there's only one type of relationship that reproduces, right?
Yeah.
Only one. All these other things that they've got going on, whether it's men with men, women with women, men that claim to be women but are actually men who are with men that claim, whatever the mix-up may be, if you just put all that out there, there's no ability to procreate.
Right.
So they have to pull our children they have to have straight people's kids.
Right.
To pull in. And again, I know how people want to say, well, you hate people, whatever. This is a fact. This is a biological fact that only one type of relationship produces kids. And so there has to be that recruiting, and that is why we have seen the indoctrination and the things that we have had. You know what happened when our great producer, Mr. Kyle, he put that video out for us, and the statement that was made under the video and all that took place, all the ranting and raving and the attacks and the filth and the threats, all that took place doesn't change the fact that only one type of relationship produces offspring.
Yep.
And so for me to say that is a biological fact, and it seems as if that we're trying to totally just pretend that every biological fact that we've ever learned and knew growing up is not true anymore. Right. Gender's fluid. A man can be a woman can be a man, all of these things. It can't happen. And so there has to be that constant draw for children, because you think about it. What if you sit down with a grown man and you start trying to talk to him about these things? It's going to be like, that doesn't work. Right. Yeah. That can't happen. There's no debate. There's no argument. But with kids, they are being taught. Yeah. They learn. And when we have people that has taken these types of things, putting it in front of them, and that is, you're exactly right. That has been the mindset of the Democrat Party. As a matter of fact, today they decided to put a statement out again. The Kentucky Democrats. I had was talking about Daniel put out a statement inviting people to come out and to join us to meet Daniel Cameron for governor. And so the Kentucky Democrats puts out a reminder about the Kentucky lawmakers under fire for writing that the LGBTQAI plus community is a disease, but he's not backing down from his remarks. And they put out this article that went out. Kentucky State Representative doubled down on after calling the LGBT community a disease. And even after we clearly said what we said, they put this out and they said Daniel Cameron doesn't stand with Kentuckians. He stands with hateful extremists like Josh Calloway. He won't even denounce his ally, Eric Dieter's racist comments. And so, but that's how they think. Right. That's how they think. And I am at the point that I'm not backing down. I'm not. I know what the truth is. I have the truth on my side. I believe that we have most Kentuckians on our side. Right. We have the majority on our side, and there's no reason to back down from the truth, or they win. Right. And so this is truly light and darkness, good and evil, spiritual, godly and satanic. And we have the responsibility to wield the truth and to pass it on to the next generation.
Yeah, exactly right. And I mean,
so I guess I'm a hateful extremist. Yeah. Hopefully Daniel doesn't cancel on me like he did on Eric. So, because he was supposed to speak at Eric Dieter's Freedom Fest, and he's not going. So, hopefully he doesn't cancel on me. But
well, and I mean the extremism part. I mean, how in the world is you thinking that a man trying to convince everybody that he's feeding a child, how is that extremism on your part?
Right.
That's one of the most extreme things I've ever heard of.
I was saying earlier that individual that I hate to even bring up about it, because I don't want to give any credence to anything that is said there, but he made the statement that the science, it's, I guess, that I'm looking at faulty science, or the science doesn't bear out what I'm saying. And I said that he's partly right. He's partly right. I'm not as much concerned about that as I am get the kid off the chest of the man.
Right. Yeah.
So that's where I was going with that a little bit ago. Right. And so you brought it up again. Yeah. But you're exactly right. I mean, how is that extreme?
Yeah. I don't know. And there's a lot of shows, like animated shows, back in the day. They used to make fun of stuff like that. And now we're doing it. It was like so satirical that it was funny to people. It was outrageous. And now our government, not just a few people, this isn't this like weird cult, community somewhere. It's our government is pushing this.
Yeah.
and celebrating and supporting it and flying that Pride Progress flag everywhere, you know. And meanwhile, look at how they treat their kids.
Yes.
You know, look at how they treat the kids that are conservative.
Yeah.
Remember Nick Sandman?
Oh,
Remember
yeah.
what happened to him? Conservative kid. They didn't talk about his free speech at all. He said nothing. He was saying nothing to that dude.
That's right.
Most of the time. He was just standing there. But because they said he was smirking, then they said that he was a white supremacist.
Right.
Do you see how they treat your
But
children if they're conservative? Yeah.
This is
crazy.
where I keep coming back to, that it's all about the kids. Just recently, there has been a new movie. It's not really documentary. It's more of a movie based on true stories, but a conglomeration of stories put together. I think it's called Sound of Freedom.
Right.
And it's about the trafficking and abuse of children, primarily of children, you know, that are trafficked and abused, and trying to shine a light on the fact that it's going on, because it does, and it is, and it has. It's the age-old sin that has been going on, that kids have been trafficked and have been abused.
Right.
People in power, people with money are tied into it. We saw what happened with Jeffrey Epstein. We see how much is suppressed. But this movie comes out, and from what I understand, it's talking about how these children are trafficked and what happens. And this detective actually quit his job and went out on his own to try to help save some of these kids. Mm-hmm. And immediately, Aaron, the media goes on the attack on this. Well, this QAnon misinformation is being spread everywhere, and we see what has happened. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm just telling you the facts of what people have been reporting. Actual people that I've talked to that have said they went. They get a little bit into the movie. All of a sudden, fire alarms go off. People have to be evacuated out of the building. They come in and sit down. 20, 30, 40% of the crowd doesn't want to wait around, so they leave and they don't see it. All types of things, strange things have been happening over something that is trying to maybe bring to light the fact that kids are being abused.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why I keep coming back to this fact that it's our kids. That is the battle of our day.
Why is the movie that is exposing the child sex traffickers, why is that the extremism? It makes no sense.
No. And if you say something about a man in scantily clad clothing, for lack of a better way to put it, dancing in a sensual way in front of kids, and if you say something about that, again, the same attack comes.
You're the extremist.
You're an extremist.
Well,
leave the kids alone.
I know.
Just leave the kids alone.
I know we don't have to, deal with this all the time, but this is a headline from the Babylon Bee. If you remember, the Miss Netherlands is now Mr. Netherlands.
Yeah.
And a man has won the Miss Netherlands. And we'll just say it's the most beautiful of all the men, we'll say. And the Babylon Bee is, of course, making fun of a large
I am a guy.
Function.
I'm a guy. And I've always tried to be respectful. And one thing that my mom and dad really instilled in me is to be respectful of women, in all ways. You know what I'm saying? Because women are special.
Right.
There's nothing like them in the world on the top side of God's earth.
That one's special.
They are special. They, in my opinion, they deserve to be elevated in every way possible. And I just wouldn't make fun of them, you know?
Right.
It doesn't bother me at all to laugh at that, at that guy, because it's not a woman. And it's sad. It's sad to think that they're so demented and their mind is so deranged
Right.
Unless they're laughing, going off and behind the scenes, and he's just like dying laughing, like, I can't believe these people bought this.
It's a beauty pageant. It is a beauty
Guys
pageant.
aren't pretty.
No,
It used to be guys were men were handsome, women were pretty. Like
Right.
that was the way that I was raised. That's the way it's always been until the last 10, 15 years.
It is a beauty pageant. And that's what I was talking about earlier, about how they take the thing that is naturally revolting to you, the thing that makes the least amount of sense, and then force it on you. Mm-hmm. Something that's no one's ever going to convince me that that's a beautiful woman.
Yeah.
0 people are ever going to convince me. I'm going to be convinced 0%.
Yeah.
That that's a beautiful woman. Nobody's ever going to convince me of that. That's the one that has to win, because you have to accept this, even though in your mind, you're never going to accept it.
Yeah.
Your mind and your common sense are always going to tell you that is a dude, But they have to accept not only that this is a woman, but this is the most beautiful woman in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
This is the most beautiful one.
Well, this is the thing.
Oh, goodness.
This is what they're after. They want us to compromise.
So messed up.
But when you compromise with someone who wants the world and you just want to be left alone, they take half of your world.
Yep. That's right.
And that's what they're after. Mm-hmm. If they can get us to compromise, they can take half of our world, and we become beholding to that idea. And we've seen what has happened. We've seen some great wins with the Supreme Court, to where they're actually trying to control people's livelihood based on whether or not they'll compromise on this.
Right. Man, I could go off on that one for a while, because the most recent case, then the state of Colorado wasn't just trying to have this, I guess it was a photographer, a website designer or something like that, wasn't just trying to have them provide services to LGBTQ, whatever, community. The actual person that was in the lawsuit said, I'll provide the services for them. I don't care. I'll do the work for them. They were trying to make her promote it on her website.
Yeah.
Saying you have to tell people that you support this ideology in your advertisements for your service that you do. She was more than willing to provide the website design or the photography, whatever. No, she had to have the pictures on there showing that she supported that.
Yeah.
Absolute. That is absolute totalitarianism. I mean, we could talk about this all night, but study the China, the brown boots and black boots, and the Nazis, Mussolini, all those, how they came to power. That's exactly what they did. Force people to do that. And then the cake one, the cake maker in Colorado. He was taken to the Supreme Court, I guess, twice, once for sure, and the second one maybe is working through. Then they've literally targeted him to try to force him to bake their cake for them.
Yeah.
And he simply can't say, they couldn't just simply go, well, I'm just going to go to the next person down the street. They targeted him in order to try to force him to do what they wanted them to do. That is extremism.
Yes.
Right? We are not trying to force the transgender people to be conservative, Christian, whatever. We're not trying to legislate that on them.
Yeah.
Right? We're trying to you're trying to legislate that they don't mutilate children whenever they are unable to provide consent. That's not extremism.
Right.
That's common sense legislation. That's all that is. Same thing with the...
What's common what?
Sense, yeah. Well, we don't know what that is. Anyway, another one, I don't know if you want to talk about this or not, but I'll just throw this up here. Another Babylon Bee headline.
Yeah. Since we were
Speaking
here
of things
last...
that don't make any sense.
Yeah, since we were here last, I heard that they found some cocaine at the White House. They're really trying to figure out where it came from. I've heard there's been an extremely in-depth investigation that is happening. They're trying to make sure that, of course, we know it wasn't the Bidens, because KJP said that they weren't there on Friday, which they were till 6. But
Right.
I'm
Totally
sure that the guy one of the guys that is in the family. I won't name his name, but his last name is Biden, who has a history of doing cocaine, probably had nothing to do with it, right? But if I was an investigator, or if I was overseeing this investigation, this is just me. It's just me. If you knew there was a guy there that had a history of using cocaine, that might be where I started with the investigation.
See, here's another thing too. The initial transcript that came through from the Secret Service said that it was found in the library on the floor, which is an area that only the family, in the Secret Service can access.
Yeah.
It's in the residence part of the West Wing.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they said, no, it wasn't found there. It was found in the locker room where staffers and family and visitors can get there.
Yeah.
So there's no telling whose it was.
Oh, yeah. And I'm sure everybody was wearing gloves because it was 90 degrees outside and they were trying to keep their hands cool. So it'd be hard to get fingerprints. Listen to this, though, for just a minute. All right. I run a transitional living home. A lot of the men that I deal with on a day-to-day basis have a history of drug use and drug abuse. Okay? This situation with Joe Biden and Hunter Biden is textbook enabling. Okay? I've dealt with this. I've dealt with men whose mothers would literally steal pills for their children to keep them from doing heroin. Like it's or give them money to buy drugs because they would tell them, well, I'm going to kill myself if you don't give me money to buy drugs, or and even much more than that. But I'm just saying, this is textbook enabling. This guy has allowed his son to use his name to make money so he can do drugs. And it's been plain to see. And the fact that the media does everything that they can to cover this up for this guy is unreal.
And the story is, it could be anybody, but it definitely wasn't the Bidens.
Right.
It could be anybody except the Bidens. Definitely was not them.
There's no way it could be the guy that it could be. No way.
It's no way that it's the guy that is on a laptop doing this same drug, whose dad's in the White House now. No way that it's him. But it could be anybody else, any visitor that walked in. It's like they don't get searched extensively coming into the White House, like the staffers don't get searched. All this stuff.
It's amazing the news cycle. Literally every hour something crazy and new is coming on, and then you always have to beware. And I've brought this up before. You always have to take a real close look, not at what the media is showing you, but what are they trying to divert your attention from?
Right.
Because when something becomes a huge story and they really put a lot of emphasis on it, there's a good chance, one, they're telling you a lie, and two, they're trying to keep you from noticing something else that is happening.
Right.
So that's one thing that's went on. I heard that Joe Biden actually maybe went on a little bit of a siesta vacation or took a siesta on the beach over the weekend.
I'll see what I can find
It's
out.
unreal, the fact they would even put that out. But again, it goes back to that respect and of the office and the dignity that used to be there. And you think about what has happened. It's been so degrading. And I'm sure we could go back to several of them, but just going back, thinking about Bill Clinton, what Bill Clinton did in the Oval Office, and Barack Obama brought in that casual look and that, casual dress. And it's definitely not done anything in regard to keeping the respect in people's mind for the office.
Right. And why? Why would you do this?
I think maybe they're trying to make us think that he's doing good. He's fine. He could barely move his chair around. we are in trouble. Not only is there an election November for the governor's race, there's an election next November in the presidential election, a presidential election, and we desperately need people to engage in this.
Right.
You know, wrapping things up, we've talked about a lot of different things tonight, but I talked about the governor's race coming in to the beginning of our discussion, and I think one of the reasons I brought that up, I think it's important for people to understand the type of policy that is so much easier to advance when we're aligned through that executive branch and down through the legislature. And I understand that we have weak people in the legislature. We have liberal people that claim to be Republicans in the legislature.
Right.
But we had some great policy that was posed last session that we did not get passed. And we made some advancement, but I'm going to be bringing back some of this legislation. I think it's important. We talked about the injunction, and then the other thing that we didn't discuss this time, we have in the past, is how that KED has put out this guidance for Senate Bill 150, the either or. You can teach sex ed at 6th grade on, or you can teach gender identity. And I had a bill, and the bill that I had put forth, House Bill 173, was much more clear on that. It was much more defining as to how that could not be taught. And part of it did not just deal with curriculum, but it also dealt with somebody actually talking about that. Right. So a lot of times what we see is that there are people that come into this system that have an agenda. We have to make sure that they may not have a textbook in front of them that they're teaching, but having these discussions about gender identity and about sexual orientation and those types of things, that's for moms and dads to have with children.
Right. Yep.
That's not for a teacher to teach.
Yep.
They need to teach them how to read and how to properly do math.
And I think one of the criticisms of your bill, your proposed bill, House Bill 173, was, and maybe even a 470, that was it Representative Decker that put that one forward.
Yes.
Then one of their criticisms was, well, it seems like you're attacking the medical community, or why are you, making these, legislative proposals against the medical community? And, they say, well, let's just focus on the education system. Let's just keep it out of the schools. Let's not focus on the medical community. But whenever you have a pediatrician that is literally introducing children as they come in to get their checkup to make sure they're healthy, literally introducing them to this ideology, then you can cut it off in the education system. But then if they go to the medical community and get the same thing, it has to handle both. And it has to handle both in order for it to be constitutionally valid.
Yeah.
Because if it is okay for the pediatrician to talk to them about, but it's not okay for their teacher to talk to them about, then that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
How are they getting, what is the pipeline that they are getting this damaging, horrible indoctrination to? And that's why HB 173 helped deal with.
Right.
And that's not saying Senate Bill 150 can't help with that. But these bills, HB 173 and, I guess maybe HB 470, were crafted to take in the entire scope of what is going on.
Right.
Not just to throw something out there that people would say, oh, we passed something,
Well, I'm going to file this one portion as a standalone that dealt with controversial subject matter. And it did deal with the teaching of sexual orientation, sexual preference, gender expression inconsistent with biological sex, so on and so forth. But also what we have seen and what has been exposed that has happened, especially through JCPS, and we're getting pushback from the Fayette County public school system as well, but that they are not to endorse, support, or oppose any candidate or nominee for public office or any elected or appointed official of the local, state, or federal government, any type of pending, proposed, or enacted legislation, so it stops them from pushing them in a direction. It talks about not just legislation. It's also said that they were not allowed to segregate students,
Right.
which happens in our school system.
Right.
Form affinity groups of students according to any protected class, or engage in discussion or activity meant to segregate or separate one or more students based on immutable characteristics with intent or effect of ascribing advantage, disadvantage, superiority, inferiority, or responsibility. Not to encourage or coerce or attempt to encourage or coerce a child to withhold any information about material or instruction presented to or conversation held with the child from his or her parents. This is, you used a phrase a little bit ago, and I kind of made light of it a little bit, but this is just common sense stuff.
Right.
Common sense things. Political candidates, parties, platforms, issues, judicial judgments, legislation, regulation, executive orders, or policies, to not be pushing those things on kids.
We've come to a place in Kentucky and in the United States where, because of idiocy, then we have to literally codify common sense. We have to codify things that just naturally always work and will work. We have to codify the way that our society should run. That, I think, it also shows how far morality has fled from our country.
Yeah.
Whenever we have gotten so far that even just common sense proposals to protect children have to literally be written line by line, detailed, lawyers go over them, detailed, to the max, in order to prevent radical idiots from trying to wiggle away to abuse children. I mean, our country's just down the tubes,
Exactly. Some more of this that I had in here I thought was just common sense stuff. No slogans, emblems, phrases, flags, or symbols that are associated with any sexual orientation, sexual preference, gender expression, or associated with any controversial subject matter can be displayed on school property by school personnel.
Right.
We have people that literally bring their pride flags into the classroom. They bring their BLM flags into the classroom. I'm for free speech. I'm just not for indoctrination.
Right.
And, these types of things, why are we not just going back to teaching kids the things that they need to be proficient in, that we have seen, we understand, we know that the scores bear out that they're not being adequately taught in certain areas or certain schools. Right. That a teacher, if they bring in a guest lecturer or guest instructor or outside presenter, to make sure that the parents are aware, just common sense stuff. Not only does this allow the parent to be in the know, but it engages parents.
Right. And
we need to see a revival of parents engaging in their children's education.
Yes. I mean, and that's, if we're looking objectively, then that is the reason why things are where they are, because parents became uninvolved in what's going on. And, or that's not the reason we are where we are. That's the reason the education system is where it is. Mm-hmm. The reason we are where we are now is because parents got involved during COVID. That is why that ideology fears parental involvement so much. They not only have to have your kids, they have to make sure the parents don't know anything about it. They have to keep them out of the loop. They have to cut them off, do whatever they have to do. So it's a twofold thing that they do. I was going to mention, too, that nobody would have a Nazi flag. That wouldn't be allowed in a school, right? Mm-hmm. Why is a Nazi flag not allowed? Let's think about that for a second. First of all, because they were anti-Semitic, murdered millions of people, right? But it's the only reason we don't allow a Nazi flag in isn't just because they murdered people. Because if that's true, then we would ban all Russian flags, because Stalin murdered or Soviet Union flag. Stalin murdered, 50 million. It's also about the ideology that they present, that they're anti-Semite, that they're racist. All of those things are terrible. BLM is just as anti-Semite as the Nazi Party before the war started and before they started rounding them up. They're just as anti-Semitic. The Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, they are just as anti-Semitic as Adolf Hitler was before everything, he started setting up the camps. How many times do we have to see this play out where they allow their anti-Semitic, their racist ideology to fly their flags and parade around and indoctrinate your kids? How many times do we have to see this play out where it starts there and then it turns out with them murdering a bunch of people before we say, okay, we're going to stop that?
Yeah.
How long has it got to be? The BLM flag doesn't just represent the sanctity of black lives. The American flag represents that.
Yeah.
That's the flag that the Union soldiers died under in order to free the slaves, is the Union flag, the flag of the United States. They didn't die under the BLM flag, right? They died under the flag of the United States of America. The BLM flag represents hatred for the nuclear family, hatred for all structure, hatred for the very flag that men marched under to free black people, hatred for the very flag that Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation under, hatred for everything that this country stands for. BLM also embraces communism, Marxism, all of it. They want a complete societal restructure. Whenever we allow that into our schools and the Pride, Progress, whatever, we are allowing the new Nazis, the new communists, to just create their, what they call the Nazi youth in Germany. We're just letting them indoctrinate them right there in the schools and create it. And in 10, 15, 20 years, if unchecked and our systems and institutions fail, then we'll be dealing with the new Hitlers and the new Stalins. And by that point, it's too late.
Yes.
Right now it's not.
It's not. And that's why I think it's important to have these discussions. That's why I brought up the fact that we have a governor's race coming up, and we need people to talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, talk to your family. When you sit down and have dinner with your family, talk about these things. Right. Talk about these issues that are taking place. Talk about your principles. Talk about your values.
Right.
And from a religious freedom standpoint, I mean, you look at all the attacks that have happened across this country on religious freedom, and people that are in power do make a difference. And the Bible tells us when the righteous rule, the people are at peace. It doesn't say what kind of people are at peace. Right. It says the people as a whole, the people are at peace. So we need people to engage in this process. If you can donate, if you can knock on a door, if you can make a phone call, if you can talk to a neighbor, talk to a friend, if you can put out a sign, put up a sign, anything that you can do that would support the cause. And most importantly, don't stay silent.
Right.
What they're betting on is that enough people will stay silent that the rest think that they're outnumbered.
Right.
But we know we're not.
Yeah.
We're on the winning side. Excited about that. Excited about policy that we're going to get to enact come January, and excited about this governor's race. So engage and be a part. Thank you so much. God bless you. Until next time, we'll see you later. Thank you for watching the Josh Calloway podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to get as much information out as we can about what is going on in our state, in our communities, and across the country. If you will share, like, and subscribe to this podcast, you could be notified as soon as a new one comes out. Tell your friends and your family about it, because we want people to be informed and engaged in protecting and promoting the truth. Thank you, and God bless.